Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Easy English Podcast. I'm Hannah, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Alex. How are you today, Alex?
Hey, Hannah. I am doing great, and I am really excited about today's episode. Today, we're talking about going to the movies, or as some people call it, the cinema. But more specifically, we're going to look at public misunderstandings, those little awkward moments that happen to all of us.
Oh, absolutely. We have all been there. You know, when you do something wrong by accident in public and you suddenly feel your face getting warm. It is a very common human experience, but it is also a fantastic way to learn everyday English vocabulary.
Exactly. To misunderstand something means to not understand it correctly. So a public misunderstanding is just a simple mistake in front of other people. Before we get into our main story today, let's talk a little bit about movie theater culture. Hannah, do you go to the movie theater often?
I try to. I love the giant screen, the dark room, and of course, the smell of fresh popcorn. There is something really special about watching a movie with a room full of strangers.
I agree, but movie theaters have changed a lot over the years, haven't they? When I was younger, you just bought a ticket, walked into the screen room, and sat down wherever you wanted. It was first come, first served.
Oh, first come, first served is a great English phrase. It means that the people who arrive first get the best choices. Can you give our listeners another example of that, Alex?
Sure. You could say the free t-shirts are first come, first serve, so you should arrive early. But nowadays, most movie theaters use a system called reserved seating.
Yes, reserved seating. This means when you buy your ticket, you must choose a specific seat. Your ticket will have a row letter, like row G, and a seat number, like seat 12. You have to sit in that exact spot.
On one hand, it is great because you don't have to rush to the theater to get a good seat. But on the other hand, it can lead to some very confusing moments, especially when the theater is dark.
It really can. Have you ever walked into a dark theater, looked at your phone screen to see your seat number, and felt completely lost? The rows are usually marked with little glowing letters on the floor, but they can be hard to see.
All the time. I usually have to squint. To squint means to look with your eyes partly closed to try and see something more clearly. I squint at the row letters, I squint at my ticket, and sometimes I still get it wrong.
And that is exactly what our story is about today. We are going to listen to a story about a character named Tom. Tom decides to go to the cinema on a Friday evening after a very long and tiring week at work.
I can already relate to Tom. After a long week, you just want to switch off your brain, eat some snacks, and enjoy a movie. You are not really paying close attention to the details.
Precisely. Tom buys his ticket online. He gets row H, seat 14. He arrives at the cinema, gets his large popcorn and a cold drink, and walks into the dark theater. The movie's about to start, so the main lights are already turned down.
This is the classic setup for a public mistake. It is dark, you are carrying popcorn in one hand and a drink in the other, and you're trying to find your seat without bumping into anyone.
Yes, Tom walks up the stairs. He sees the letter H on the side of the row. He walks into the row, counts the seats, and sees seat 14 is empty. He sits down, puts his drink in the cup holder, and sighs with relief. He thinks, perfect, I made it just in time.
But wait. There is a catch, isn't there?
Of course there is. A few minutes later, while the movie trailers are playing, a woman walks down the row. She is looking at her ticket, then looking at Tom, and then looking back at her ticket. She looks a bit hesitant.
Hesitant is a wonderful word for English learners. If you're hesitant, it means you are slow to speak or act because you feel a bit uncertain or embarrassed. She doesn't want to make a scene, but she thinks Tom is in her seat.
Exactly. She doesn't want to be rude, so she stands near Tom and says in a very quiet, polite voice, "Excuse me, I think you might be in my seat."
The classic line, "I think you might be in my seat." It is polite because she says, "I think," and "might." This makes it sound less like an accusation and more like a gentle question.
By the way, if you are enjoying Leo's story today, taking a second to like this episode or subscribe to our channel really helps us reach more English learners around the world.
It really does. And please feel free to leave any questions in the comments because we read and answer them all. Anyway, back to the cinema story.
Yes, it is much nicer than saying, "Hey, get out of my chair." So Tom looks up. He is surprised. He is sure he is in the right place. He says, "Oh, really? I thought this was row H, seat 14.
And this is where the polite and slightly awkward interaction begins. The woman points to her ticket and says, "Yes, this is row H, seat 14, but I think this is actually row G." Tom looks down at the floor and his heart sinks.
Oh no! His heart sinks is an idiom we use when someone suddenly feels disappointed, embarrassed, or sad. Tom realizes he made a classic mistake. He sat in the row right in front of his actual row.
It is such an easy mistake to make in the dark. Row G and row H look almost identical when you are tired. So what does Tom do next?
Well, Tom's face turns completely red. He immediately stands up, gathers his jacket, his large popcorn, and his drink. He says, "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. You are completely right. This is indeed row G. I am supposed to be one row behind you in row H." He feels so embarrassed.
That is so relatable. The word indeed is great here. He says, "This is indeed row G." We use indeed to emphasize that something is true, especially after we just found out or confirmed it. For example, "It is indeed a cold day today," or "That is indeed the correct answer."
Exactly. And the woman is very kind. She smiles warmly and says, "Oh, don't worry about it at all. It is incredibly dark in here, and the letter lights on the floor are so small. It happens to everyone." Her kindness makes Tom feel a lot better.
That is such a sweet response. She says, "It happens to everyone." This is a very common and comforting English phrase. We say "it happens" or "it happens to everyone" to show sympathy when someone makes a common, simple mistake. It tells the other person not to feel bad or ashamed.
Yes, it instantly lowers the tension in the air. So Tom smiles back, steps out into the aisle, and moves to the row behind her. He looks at his ticket again, very carefully this time, and finds row H, seat 14. He sits down, places his drink in the cup holder, and takes a deep breath.
Ah, the aisle. Let us spell that word for our listeners, because the spelling is quite tricky. It is A-I-S-L-E, but the letter S is completely silent. We pronounce it aisle, just like the word aisle for a small island. An aisle is the passage or walkway between rows of seats, like in a cinema, a church, or an airplane.
Yes, aisle is a very useful word. You also see it in supermarkets, where foods are organized in different aisles, like the cereal aisle or the pasta aisle. So Tom is finally in his correct seat in row H. But Alex, the awkwardness is not quite over yet.
Oh no, what happens next? Does he drop his popcorn on her head from behind?
Fortunately, no. He does not drop his popcorn. But because he is sitting directly behind her now, he realizes he has to be extra careful. He wants to put his feet up on the bar under her seat, but he stops himself because he doesn't want to accidentally kick her chair. He is suddenly very self-conscious.
Self-conscious is a fantastic adjective. When you are self-conscious, you are excessively aware of your appearance, your actions, or what other people are thinking about you. You feel a bit worried that people are watching you or judging you. For example, I felt very self-conscious when I walked into the quiet room wearing noisy shoes.
That is a perfect example. Tom is so self-conscious that he sits perfectly still. He barely even chews his popcorn because he is worried the crunching sound is too loud and might annoy the woman in front of him. Every time he takes a sip of his drink through the straw, he tries to make it completely silent.
Oh, we have all been there. That moment when you were trying to be so quiet that every tiny sound you make feels like a loud explosion. You try to chew a potato chip or a piece of popcorn, and in your head, it sounds like a thunderstorm.
It really does. But then, the main lights in the theater go completely dark, and the movie finally begins. The loud music starts playing from the giant speakers, and the screen lights up. Suddenly, Tom realizes he can relax. The movie is loud enough to cover any sounds he makes.
What a relief. He can finally eat his popcorn in peace. But wait, Hannah, does he enjoy the movie or is he still thinking about the awkward seat mix-up?
At first, he is still a little distracted. Distracted means you are not paying full attention to what is happening in front of you because you are thinking about something else. But after about 10 minutes, the movie gets really exciting. It is an adventure film, and he completely forgets about his embarrassment.
That is the magic of the cinema. It transports you to another world. So the movie plays, Tom enjoys his popcorn, and everything is fine. But what happens when the movie ends and the lights come back on? Do they have to face each other again?
Yes, they do. When the credits start rolling on the screen, the house lights turn on. People start standing up, putting on their coats, and getting ready to leave. The woman in row G stands up and turns around to grab her scarf, which she had dropped on the floor near Tom's feet.
Oh, this is the moment of truth. Do they pretend they do not know each other, or do they say something?
Well, Tom sees the scarf on the floor first. He bends down, picks it up, and hands it to her with a polite smile. He says, "Here's your scarf." She takes it, smiles warmly, and says, "Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for being such a quiet neighbor during the movie."
Wow, that's incredibly nice of her. She noticed how quiet and respectful he was. That must have made Tom feel so much better about the whole situation.
It did. He chuckled and said, "Well, I wanted to make sure I didn't cause any more trouble after stealing your seat." They both laughed, said goodbye, and walked out of the theater into the cool evening air.
What a wonderful, heartwarming ending to what could have been a very uncomfortable situation. It just goes to show that a little bit of politeness, some kind words, and a sense of humor can turn an awkward mistake into a pleasant human connection.
It really does. And because they handled it so well, we now have a fantastic story to help us learn some very useful English. I think this is the perfect time to break down some of the key vocabulary and polite phrases we heard in Tom's story. What do you think, Alex?
I think that is an excellent idea, Hannah. When you are learning a language, everyday situations like going to the cinema are perfect for practice. Let's start with the word reserved. In the story, Tom bought a reserved seat. What does that mean exactly?
Great question. Reserved means that a specific seat is saved just for you. Nobody else is allowed to sit there because you already paid for it or claimed it in advance. For example, you can say, "I called the restaurant to get a reserved table for tonight." Or, "All the front row seats are reserved for special guests."
That is very clear. And the opposite of a reserved seat is free seating or first come, first served, where you can sit anywhere you want. But in most modern movie theaters now, you have to choose your seat when you buy the ticket, which brings us to the next term, row. Tom was looking for row G. Can you explain what a row is, Anna?
Of course. A row is a straight line of seats that goes from left to right, side to side. In a theater, rows usually have letters of the alphabet, like row A, row B, row C, and so on. Row A is usually at the very front, close to the screen, and the letters go back from there. So row G is several rows back. We also use the word row in other places, like a row of houses, or sitting in the front row at a concert.
And within each row, there are numbers for each individual seat, like row G, seat 12. Now, let's talk about the action Tom did. He settled in. That is a phrasal verb, to settle in. It means to make yourself comfortable in a new place, to get relaxed. For example, when you get into a hotel room, you unpack your bags and settle in for the movie. Tom sat down, put his drink in the cup holder, and settled in for the movie.
I love that phrasal verb, settle in. It sounds so cozy. After a long day of work, I like to settle in on the sofa with a warm cup of tea. It is a very natural phrase that native speakers use all the time. Now, what happened next? The movie started, the lights went down, and then a woman came and said, "Excuse me." Let's talk about "excuse me" for a moment, because it is incredibly useful.
Oh, absolutely. Excuse me is like a magic key in English. It is the most polite way to get someone's attention, especially a stranger. You use it when you want to walk past someone in a crowded space, or when you want to ask a question, or, like in this story, when you need to point out a mistake. Hannah, how is excuse me different from I am sorry?
That is a very important difference. We use excuse me before we disturb someone or to get their attention. We use I am sorry or sorry after we have made a mistake or done something wrong. So the woman said excuse me to get Tom's attention. But when Tom realized he was in her seat, he said, "Oh, I am so sorry," because he made the mistake. He used sorry to apologize.
Ah, that is a perfect explanation. Excuse me to open the conversation politely, and I am sorry to apologize for the mistake. Let's practice a quick example. If I accidentally bump into you in the street, I say, "Oh, sorry." But if I want to ask you for the time, I say, "Excuse me, do you have the time?"
Exactly. You nailed it, Alex. Now, let's look at another polite phrase the woman used. She said, "I think you might be in my seat." This is a very soft and polite way to tell someone they made a mistake. Notice how she did not say, "You are in my seat, get up." That sounds very aggressive and rude.
Yes, she used I think and might be. In English, we call these softeners or hedging. They make our statements sound less direct and more polite. Instead of saying, "This is wrong," we say, "I think there might be a small mistake here." It gives the other person a chance to correct themselves without feeling embarrassed or attacked.
It really does. It keeps the atmosphere friendly. Tom responded by looking at his ticket. He said, "Let me check my ticket." This is another great phrase. Let me is a polite way of saying, "I will do this right now." For example, "Let me open the door for you," or "Let me find the answer for you." It shows you are helpful and cooperative.
And then, when Tom checked his ticket, he realized he made a mistake. He said, "Oh, you are right." Admitting you are wrong quickly and politely is a great social skill. He didn't argue. He just accepted it, apologized, and stood up to move. He said, "My apologies." Now, my apologies is a slightly more formal way of saying I am sorry, but it works beautifully in situations like this.
Yes, my apologies sounds very respectful. You can use it in business emails too, like, "My apologies for the delay in answering your email." It is a very polite and professional phrase. Another thing Tom did was he shuffled out of the row. The verb to shuffle means to walk without lifting your feet fully off the ground, taking small, quick steps. Why do you think he shuffled, Alex?
Well, because there was very little space. In movie theaters, the space between the rows of seats is usually very narrow. If people are already sitting down, you cannot walk normally. You have to turn sideways and shuffle past them, trying not to step on their toes or hit their knees. It is a very specific kind of movement, and shuffle is the perfect word for it.
Exactly. You're trying so hard not to bump into anyone, and you keep saying, "Sorry, excuse me, sorry." We have all been there. But, Alex, what really made this awkward situation turn out so well wasn't just the words Tom and the woman used, it was also how they said them. Their tone of voice was very soft and gentle.
Oh, that is a huge point, Hannah. The tone of voice is often more important than the actual words we speak. If you say, "Oh, I am sorry," in a flat, cold, or angry voice, it does not sound like an apology at all. It might even sound sarcastic or rude. But if you say it with a soft, rising tone, it shows you genuinely care about the other person's feelings.
Yes, and today we want to give our listeners some practical speaking tips on how to use a soft tone of voice to keep awkward situations friendly. When you find yourself in a tricky spot, like sitting in someone else's seat or accidentally bumping into someone on the street, the first tip is to smile slightly. Even if you're wearing a mask or if it is a bit dark, a gentle smile changes the shape of your mouth and that actually changes the sound of your voice. It makes your voice sound warmer and more welcoming.
That is so true, Hannah. It is a physical thing. If your face is tense, your voice sounds tense. If your face relaxes with a small smile, your vocal cords relax too. My second tip is to slow down your speaking speed. When we get nervous or embarrassed, we tend to talk very fast. We want to say, "I'm sorry," and run away. But speaking too fast can make you sound defensive or impatient. Instead, take a breath, slow down, and speak calmly.
I love that advice. Slowing down really helps. My third tip is to use a slightly higher pitch at the end of your sentences. In English, when our voice goes up at the end, it sounds friendly, open, and polite. For example, listen to the difference. If I say, "Sorry about that," with my voice going down, it sounds a bit heavy and serious. "Sorry about that." But if my voice goes up slightly at the end, "Sorry about that," or "Sorry about that," it sounds light, friendly, and helpful. Do you hear the difference, Alex?
I absolutely do. The second one sounds like you are happy to help and that you really mean it. It invites the other person to be friendly back. The first one sounds like you just want the conversation to end. Let's practice a few phrases using these tips, Hannah, so our listeners can hear them in action. Let's try the phrase, "I think you might be in my seat," using a soft, polite tone.
Great idea. I will say it first, and then you can try it, Alex. Listeners, pay attention to how my voice is soft, a little bit high-pitched, and slow. "Excuse me, I think you might be in my seat." See how it sounds like a gentle question rather than an accusation?
Yes, it sounds very sweet and non-threatening. Let me try. "Oh, excuse me, I think you might be in my seat." How was that?
Perfect, Alex. You sounded very polite. Now let's practice the response. Imagine you are the one who made the mistake and you want to apologize and move quickly. The phrase is, "Oh, my apologies. Let me move out of your way." I will try this one first. "Oh, my apologies. Let me move out of your way."
That was excellent, Hannah. It sounded so sincere. Let me try that one as well. "Oh, my apologies. Let me move out of your way." I made sure to raise my pitch slightly on apologies and way to keep it warm and friendly.
You did a fantastic job, Alex. If anyone said that to me in a movie theater, I would instantly smile and say, "Oh, no problem at all." And that is the magic of using a soft tone of voice. It diffuses the tension immediately. Instead of a conflict, you have a nice, polite connection with another human being. It turns a bad moment into a pleasant one.
It really does. And these tips are not just for movie theaters. You can use them at work, at school, in shops, or when traveling. Whenever there is a small misunderstanding, remember to smile, slow down, use softeners like "I think" or "might," and keep your tone of voice gentle and warm. It makes a world of difference.
It certainly does. Well, we have covered so much today. We listened to Tom's story about his little seat mix-up in the movie theater. We learned some fantastic vocabulary like usher, fumble, row, and shuffle. And we practiced how to use softeners and a gentle tone of voice to handle awkward situations like a pro.
We hope this episode was helpful for you and that you feel more confident handling these small, everyday situations in English. Thank you so much for listening and practicing with us today. Keep smiling, keep practicing, and we will see you in the next episode of Easy English Podcast. Bye-bye, everyone.